Yeah, starting to fill up. We'll wait till it levels out a little bit.
Joel, how are you doing? I haven't talked to you in a while.
Oh, I'm good. Chris, I was going to say you could start playing guitar as like an intro, like a kind of a ambiance while we wait.
We played music the other day.
He played the Blues Brothers.
You should. I haven't. I stayed at your house that one time for the very first TFC, and I don't think I actually got to. Maybe a little bit. I'm good. I don't know what I could say I'm really been up to lately. That's not different than the normal, but yeah, life is good.
Are you in a bunker?
This is my basement. You want a tour? This is the new podcast studio for now. I'll give you welcome to my crib, because I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Berkeley with 2 kids for a while. Another reason I left, too expensive. My mortgage payment is about the same as what I was paying for an apartment, a 600 square foot apartment back there. So I can't. 600
square feet and 2 kids.
Yep.
Oh my.
Yeah. So you know what though? If we were all living in third world countries, like I would have been upper class there. I think a lot of it's perspective, and you just learn to figure out over time slowly how to manage things. We also had a nice yard and turf area that the kid is like a playroom. It was usually warm there. So, and there was other little kids in like the apartments next to us. So it was almost like a more communal vibe, like a slight, maybe tribal, if you would say, on some level, and then you move to the suburbs and you talk to your neighbors every once in a while. It's just different, right? But yeah, this is the new crib I have. Let me just show you it's cribs. I have a flag. It was a flag with some Olympians, bolt, and then because I don't know. It's just kind of, you got to get the best of all worlds, right? I like
right.
There's a K box that probably doesn't get used that much, but it's good for single joint isolation as I've used it. And oh yeah, not much, but it's coming along. I'm gonna get a gym in here at some point. It won't be Chris's. It won't be as good as Chris's thing, but you know, it'll be it. That's the ultimate inspiration, but it'll be all right.
Well, it takes time to build it. I piecemealed it too. Remember, I started out in the garage and I had a power rack and that was it.
There's no room to sprint in here. Even with a run rocket, like now I could go out that door. Like I could go out that door and then you got about 5 more yards and you're done. So that ain't gonna happen. So I just speed rush and lunges, I guess, if we're doing them down here.
First 3 steps.
Yeah, or just first 3. Yep. And then
shut it down.
You'll be the best first 3 step people ever in here. So.
Okay, it looks like we've leveled off. For the people that are here live, there is a Q&A section that you can click on. There's also a chat. You guys can chat among each other as much as you want. But if you want us to see your questions, don't put them in chat, put them in the Q&A. And with that, I'd like to welcome Joel Smith used to be Berkeley. Where are you now, Joel?
Yeah, I'm in Cincinnati now. Working, crazy. I'm close. I used to fly out there when it wasn't digital or virtual. So.
Wow, I had no idea. Okay, that's very cool. But
it's
anyway,
still a flight. It's too short. It's too long of a drive.
Well, the flight actually is shorter than the drive. No doubt. But I don't know. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So Chris, do you want to kick off the questions?
Sure. Enjoyed your presentation. I like the shout out for the long lost Captain Morgan runs.
Oh yeah, those are it, man. Those are one of my favorites.
Well, that's okay. Too. Don't drop it there. Explain to me the Captain Morgan runs. I think I've seen them.
Do you want, Chris? Can you demonstrate them in your?
I don't know. Can people see our cameras?
I can, if you want.
I mean, this is a visual recording too, right?
Yeah.
So Captain Morgans are a drill that I invented a while back. Of course, there's a story why I did it, but it's basically a hop, and you bring your leg out to the side like Captain Morgan. So you stand like Captain Morgan in the commercials, and then you're gonna hop forward. And so the reason why I invented those is I was trying to work lateral chain with two kids that have some bad tibial torsion, which is they've got bow legs. And
But
so
it
to
is
try
not-
and get, what's
It's
that?
not diagonal.
What's that?
It's forward. It's not
It's
diagonal.
forward.
Yeah, hopping forward.
You actually don't need to go diagonal on this one.
Okay.
Just because of the rotation of the hips, it drives you to your front, the front of your foot.
And this is another one of those things that even though you did it as a correctional thing, it could be good for anybody.
Yeah, it turned out to be pretty good for everyone.
Good.
And the way I know that is I worked it with the two brothers and it worked really well. So let's try it with some other people. Wow, look at that. It worked pretty good. And so the reason why it worked well is people with tibial torsion usually stay on the outside of their foot. And when you have that curved bow leg, usually that rear glute med doesn't work really well. So I wanted to develop that so they had the stability in their hip to come through to their forefoot. And so we just started hopping like that. And of course, I got to have a name for something so kids recognize it. And at first, I thought, I hope to God they don't know what I mean when I say Captain Morgan. But then I guess the commercials are everywhere and stuff like that.
Yeah, you can't get away. Every kid I've mentioned that idea, they know what it is. So
they know what it is. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Yeah, I don't know. There was a team back when I coached at Wilmington. We got some kids from, I think, Jamestown High School. Not to derail this, but there was the Jamestown, what was it, Johnnies or Jimmies or something, or they must have been the Johnnies, and they wanted their logo. High school kids wanted their logo to be the Johnny Walker guy or something. You know, it gone over very well. Anyway, sorry to be off track there.
But yeah, that's where that drill comes from. And so you can hop. And actually, when you start to get some distance with that hop, it gets to be quite a taxing exercise. And it's hips and feet, which is, if you can get those two things, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah. Can you remind me of the context that I brought it up in the presentation?
Rotational plyometrics.
Oh yeah. Okay. Got it. I was like, oh, that would make sense. Yes. Okay. Yeah. I like it a lot. I've almost felt like you could also take it the direction of, I have the person actually have the foot on the ground out, a little, like not linear, but out, because you can hit the supination, the pinky toe side of the foot. It just rehearse almost the pressure in that kind of blade edge scenario. Yeah. Hard to describe, but I almost feel like there could be, depending on the alignment, you can have different mechanisms, but you're just giving someone a rotate, and the glutes are a rotational muscle too. They are front to back, but people don't think about they're a huge rotator. And that's why swimmers, you can say, well, why don't swimmers have strong butts or big, really, they usually don't have big glutes. I work with swimmers a long time. Well, swimming is just, there's not much rotation when you're doing this. The only swimmers that had glutes were breaststrokers, because their legs are actually rotating. Yeah. And funny enough, when I would have the swim sprinters actually sprint, which was more for me than for them, I believe. However, it was fun to see which swimmers were fast, and it was always the breaststrokers for 10 yards. And those were the guys with glutes, and they were little, they weren't like bow-legged. I think you would be a terrible breaststroker if you were bow-legged, actually.
Yeah, it'd be too much.
Because you have to internally rotate a lot. Yeah. But usually their feet were out like this, because that was good feet. And anyways, inside edge, and just those glutes, and those guys were just killing everybody, even the ones who were stronger in squat or not, it didn't matter. And so that was for me. That was, for them, I don't know, some power. It was fun, but we did a 10-yard sled push too one day, because I was like, all right, no one's going to pull a hamstring doing this. And then one guy tried so hard, he flipped the sled over and fell over it. And that was pretty much the last time we did anything like that. But I learned a lot about breaststrokers and glutes and rotation, and just kind of the way people operate who don't usually run.
So what are your favorite rotational plyos?
Yeah, that's a good one. So for me, I would say, because you watch now for track and field, if I'm talking about track and field, the only real rotational plyo events truly are probably high jump and javelin, which is, it's funny to think about that. But like if you've coached track, you probably have that long jumper that just can't high jump and arch and turn for anything. Like, it's like, man, why can't you do this? And they don't get it. So for me, it's like, I wouldn't necessarily, in my track coaching experience, I didn't use a ton of them, I would say. if you're high jumping and running the curve and stuff like that, and you're doing curve, or you're running curves on an indoor track. And let me say this too, is sprinting, I feel, someone mentioned this on a podcast I was just recording, is sprinting trains the feet and is also plyometric. And it's a plyometric kind of like more of the supination side of the foot, whereas versus like a standing vertical, you're really getting into the pronation. So I think just sprinting on a curve and just doing high jump and some curvilinear running, and like you call the infinity runs, is a lot of the main points. So for me, the best stuff I do like is simple. I like doing like bounding, for example. I don't know if I mentioned this, but bounding, working a rotational element of the arm. So let's say I'm bounding and I'm gonna do single leg bounding. I'll say, hey, I want you to work your arm in like this rotational. So it's like rotation meets linear, if that makes sense. And if you watched, like Stefan Holm did a lot of bounding stuff back when he was, his training videos were kind of all over the place. And if you watch that guy bounding on one leg, Stefan Holm, for those who didn't know, 5'11", he jumped 7'10" and a half. And his arm is doing like this the whole time. So it's a rotation. Now, in terms of like, I do like the idea of doing like bounding on a slight curve. So maybe not like do a true, like a big curve, but like just enough of a curve that will, like Chris does the diagonal runs on the with not the, well, you could do it the 1080 or extra genie, sorry. And that is just enough to bias a rotational element of the foot in a way you didn't. So you could do a complex like curvilinear bounding and then do regular bounding. So you could do it as a warm up. So I also like those hops where you turn, I think are good.
180s?
Like where you're turning a 180 in between each one is good, because I think that, and this is more for team sport athletes or track athletes who don't ever play a team sport, which that's unfortunate.
Yes. We do a lot of things that I don't think is real important for sprinting, but yet I've just always noticed that basketball players used to be my most durable athletes. I don't get many of them anymore. And basketball, because of all those rotational things, I think really improved their fitness or their durability. And so we do a lot of things like that, even though they may not directly affect speed.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's the thing. Like, it's like if you're a jumper, like when I worked with club track, I would get these kids, they're like 10 years old and that they do high jump. And then I'm like, do you guys play other sports? And they're like, cross country. And I'm like, like, you know, like if you play basketball or even football, you're getting rotational plyometrics. And the more I've learned, like, and dug into the bio, especially stuff I've learned from Adarian Barr, like you see all the rotational nuance, and even just like just a cut. There's a lot of reacceleration, absorption, release. One leg is more pronating, one leg is supinating, and you rotate off it, and it's fast, and there's an emotional connection. You're getting, it's like, you know, the gauntlet run kind of, I'm defending somebody, it's all automatic. And so I think that if we play sports, we get a good quota of these rotational plyometrics without even thinking about it. So, but if I am going to do them, and like I think about it more for like a team sport, like a basketball player, jumping athlete, doing those 180s. I like depth jumps with lateral. So I like depth jumps where you depth jump and you're going to hop off the box and land and then cut hard back the other way. So you can overload a cut pattern. And I like jumps where you hop off a box and then do a 360 and land. And so those have been staples of mine. Those ever since the first jump program I ever did personally was like, that was good, that was worth anything, was called The Science of Jumping. And this was in like 1996, long time ago. And it was the workout was like depth drops, depth jumps, like lateral depth jumps, 360 depth jumps. And I just did it and just believed it. And you know, full on sold in on the program. And when I was coaching track at Wilmington, I had good athletes. I mean, I coached a national champion, the 55, the 60, 55 then. I coached runner-up in high jump and a lot of All-Americans in high jump, but I actually didn't use those linear ones for those athletes that much. But those athletes were always playing pickup basketball when they shouldn't have been. They were getting that stuff. And they would, honestly, I didn't fight it because I knew that just made them more athletic. Like my boss was like hating that these kids in indoor were playing in basketball. And I'm like, it sucks. I hope you don't get hurt. But honestly, I mean, actually the kid I had, he eventually won the D3 national championship, jumped 6'11.5", and he actually had the height to jump 7'4". I only coached him 2 years. The first year he was, you've seen this with football where it's in the spring and the sport's trying to take the kid, they got football practice, and he had basketball stuff in the spring, but I said, hey, dude, play pickup twice a week in the spring, please. Like, I want you to. And his vertical, like, it wasn't until he stopped that his vert actually started dropping a little bit, even though we were doing the plyo. So the sport is the ultimate rotational plyo. And then I like the twisty stuff. And I will say this, if it's just track, and where I kind of evolved to was, if I'll put this in for my online clients a lot, is we'll do a circuit. So let me tell you 2 circuits that I'll do. One would be a depth jump circuit, and you're going to warm up by doing like a lateral depth jump. Then you're going to do a 360 depth jump, and then you'll do a regular one. And it's kind of like you're warming your joints up by getting rotation in the first
now,
two.
when you're saying that, do you actually jump and then 360, or are you 360 in the depth jump?
Jump and then hit the ground and then 360
and then do it. Right.
And land it. Yeah. And you could do one each way. So yeah. And I guess you could say there's like vestibular stuff. You could look at the nervous system. It's fun. People like it. It's more than just doing it. And so I found that and it's funny because I started this with actually this is more for me than them, but I started this with swimmers just to see what would happen. And a swimmer is not a candidate for a 360 depth jump, but their final jumps did get better because we did the athletic stuff in between rather than just, and this is a big thing, is we live in this world where it's like everything is just max, max, max. Like every rep is all out. And it's like, no, like, yes, there's an intention to get better, but use the different jumps and just experience them. It's not like when you're playing basketball that you're like grinding out that jump. You just did it. It's like, just do the jumps, get the distance, and then the jumps should get easier. You should jump higher and do it easy because you activated all your joints rotationally, just like and the last thing I'll say is like, I try to base everything off like the best people warm up to dunk. All my clients ever, I've never had a client who has not jumped higher after a game of pickup basketball. I could never manufacture a warm up ever that could do what pickup basketball can do. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, it's peer based, it's emotional, there's neurological, I'm going to guard you and this and that. And you're getting your temperature up, but there's just so much like little minute rotational stuff and quick foot impulse stuff going on. And I just think it's this orchestra that if we can at least borrow some things from that when we are doing our jump training and jump warm-ups, I think that we're in a good place. And so that I have that. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is I've started this for I have online clients who just want to jump higher and dunk. And one of the circuits that I've come up with I really like is it'll be something like this. They're out the court. They're going to do like a single leg strength. It's like French contrast. So they'll do like a single leg strength exercise, maybe a pistol squat or something. Then they'll do like a 360 and touch the rim or something that's rotational to jump and touch. And then they'll do an actual jump. And then they have to run a court suicide like really fast. And that's that energy system recovery. Like you're getting into that higher bracket. And that just for the same reason that you'll run the 200 or the 110 hurdles and come back and long jump farther because it warms you up. I know that happens all the time. So I try to use that in the session, and this has worked really well. I've seen good results from this. And so it's like, strength, rotation, jump high, then do a fast sprint, change of direction, like 20-second burst, and then go back to the top. And so those are some areas that I've been using that with.
Speaking of that basketball, that was one thing I really liked in your presentation was, and I do this with my kids, especially my middle school kids, find a rim that's adjustable, the ones that go by the inch where you crank it and you find the heights that you can dunk or just barely dunk, and then you mark it. So you go a little bit low, you can work on all those dunks, do a 360, do all these different things, because now you're giving that athlete a target and everyone wants to be able to say they dunk and they want to hang there and do all that stuff. But then as you get better or progress, you can inch it up. Yeah. So now you have a higher target that you have to go to. And what 8th grade kid doesn't want to go practice dunking? If I tell them to we're going to go do 3 sets of 15 of this kind of vertical jump, chances are it's not going to happen. But if you can adjust that rim all over the place, sky's the limit.
I think dunking might be the best high jump exercise in the world. I love dunking for that. And I was going to mention too about basketball that that basketball players are kind of notorious for high jumping really well early in the track season, like a week out of basketball, and then going downhill for the rest of the season because they jumped too much and they got away from basketball. So I think basketball is amazing stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And the low rim dunks are awesome too. And because one of the things with the low rim dunks that's really cool is, one, it is rotational. I wish in my own career I would have done more of that. Like, because me, it was always just, I mean, especially in 9th and 10th grade when it wasn't the easiest to dunk, there was a lot of just straining and just try to get the dunk. But it's so much more fun to do all the different ones on a lower rim, for one. Two, it's way more robust because you have to turn in all these little different directions. And I think I mentioned that in my presentation. It's like, if I'm just going max and max depth jump, you're really only building one paradigm. And that's that class 1 off the heel more so paradigm than really getting good at the ball of the foot, getting good at the ball of the foot on rotation, which that does matter in high jump, even triple jump. You watch the feet of like triple jumpers and look at this like steering and the way those little circles are happening. There's a lot of athleticism there that we wouldn't normally see. So the low rim is, and last thing with the low rim too, it's kind of like a hurdle, more like a hurdle hop. And I think my last point was like projection versus jumping over something, because a low rim dunk, you jump and literally right away, you're not floating right away. You got to start moving. So you're returning energy. Like as soon as you leave the ground, you're starting to already return energy to do whatever you're doing. So it's like this, the cycle is cycling faster rather than this, I hope I get up there, you know, like, and so it's, I mean, again, it's good to do both, but I think that it's like these fun, natural and organic human things. I think it's like, you want to look to those first rather than you just rely on some special exercise. Those are just cherries on top and selective, and use them to make the jumping better, but don't, like, I relied on them way too much. And even as a coach, I think I might have early in my coaching career.
There's a question up here about depth jumps. What variations for depth jumps do you incorporate into your programming? What progressions do you recommend?
Sure. So the big thing with depth jumping, and it's just totally age dependent. So the first thing I'll say is, I've heard this and I do agree with it to a degree, is to not do depth jumps as long as possible in an athlete's career, in the sense that they are the ultimate, like we want to slow cook athletes because we always want to leave them with something to hand the baton off, so to speak, be it chronologically to hand the baton off. I'm 17. I want to give you some things when you're 18 to be better. And I want to give you some things for your college. It's like you could say in distance running, you know, the college coach knows the kid who ran 80, 90 miles a week in high school isn't going to have as much left in the tank. So that being said, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like in one of my original products, because this is stuff that's just, it's instinctual and this is anecdotal, what I'm saying, because there's no true research on this. So you could look at what the Russians did in their long-term development model and all those types of things. When do I introduce X, Y, Z? So the first thing is I just would, because I've seen to also introduce jumps early, like age 12, because the nervous system wants that then. And so, but I don't know, like Chris said, why don't you just have the kid low rim dunk? I mean, my kids would be ecstatic to low rim dunk then, you know, just, and it's fun. It's not like training. And maybe if they want to do that, but so I would generally just try to delay it till the older years of maturity, not because it's not super powerful. It's a really, really potent thing. You give that to a 14 or 15-year-old, and they're probably going to put 4 or 5 inches on their vertical, you know, over a course of several months, if they're ready for it. But the question is like, if you saw the presentation, there's certain things that in a depth jump, a very linear up and down type jump, where most sport jumps are, you cover a distance and you go up. So just that, knowing that fundamental difference. I mean, of course you could say it's the weightlifting or anything else. So one is just, I would generally try to delay it. You know, as I look to now coach high school track here, which I'm excited about, my thought is, okay, like this is just what I have in my head, is I probably wouldn't bring depth jumps in the equation until you're a junior or a senior, you know. If before that, maybe it's like, and then it's like, oh yeah, next year I get to do depth jumps. Like, it's like I earned it by being a junior or something, you know, you have this thing to look forward to. So that's one thing. But then just one is, can you land well? So just, can you drop off a box? Let's say you're working 18, 24, whatever inches. Can you drop and land fairly silently? I would have a drill when I was coaching at Wilmington where I had a decibel meter on my phone. I would put it next to the floor where my athletes would land one day. And I was just like, who can land and it's the quietest, you know, who can land like a cat, right? Like, who can land the most like a cat? I think if you've spent time around very good jumpers, I remember when I went to the I mean, Tony, I know you've been to the NCAA Division I championships, and I know when I was there the first time in 2005, just to watch, I watched triple jump, and those guys were so quiet and smooth, just like they were dancing almost over the track as they were doing this. And so, anyways, I had my athletes do that and land as quietly as possible. And my guy who was my best high jumper in terms of height overhead, he was 5'11" and jumped 6'11". He's not the guy who won, but he was the quietest out of everybody. He could, so I'm not saying you have to do that, but one is just, so first, just introduce landings, just introduce.
Isn't it shocking? To me, probably half of my incoming kids every year in high school cannot land. They just collapse. They fall down. They cannot stick a landing from 3 feet.
Yeah. It's and it's funny, and yet let's go put a bar on these kids' backs, and that's going to make them better, you know?
Right.
I mean, again, I'm not anti-weightlifting, but I just think it's funny what people think this is going to make you better, but you can't do. And that's the thing, as I've learned as a coach, and it's a different talk, but like, you should be able to do this before you really think that the squats are going to make you that much better. Because as a college coach, this is just me rabbit trailing, but seeing the other end of it, these kids who are 18 to 22, the kids who did get stronger and continue to get better, there's a lot of kids who got stronger and continue to get better. And there's a lot of kids who got stronger and continue to get worse or stay the same. And those kids who got stronger and stayed the same, they can't do these things we're talking about. And so it's just, you have to realize those things. And then it just explains everything better. Cause then anyways, so yeah, it's amazing the kids who can't land quietly and just like collapse. They can't like keep their head up and keep a good position. That's really important.
Or even time up their jumping properly, where arms and chest and different things are firing at different times. And the end game is they're getting off the ground, but it's not pretty. It's not pretty.
No, no, it's timing is big. Yeah. Like Darian's, has opened me up to, especially like the arm timing. And so I would say land first. Can you land? Are you chronologically ready? And I don't know if there's a magic age. I would just say, look, like, have I done a lot of other things before I'm going to really get into depth jumps? So landing, regular hurdle hops, basic bounding, a lot of just like ankle hop stuff, even jump roping. Jump roping is fine. Jump rope on one leg. Like, tell me how, if you can jump rope on one leg easily and do double unders on one leg, like it sounds simple, but that's good ankle strength. I did that stuff a ton on my own before I even got into depth jumps and all that. And it's funny because I became way more heel dominant as I lifted more in my 20s, and I was still doing depth jumps, but it's like, I'm realizing as I'm getting older again and kind of just thinking about all this, that the core is this being able to get class 2, get to the ball of the foot really fast. And so that just needs to be there. And then when a kid, you think they're ready, the kid's ready, that it's then working in depth jump, like a depth jump over a hurdle, a depth jump over 2 hurdles, those, anything like that, lateral depth jumps, anything I've said, you can start doing it. There's nothing that's magic. It's just, can you land? Are you ready to incorporate this really intense mechanism of work? And then just doing a way to like assess it. So just depth jumping and just jumping up into space is not going to do a lot because there's no motivation. It's like running a sprint and not knowing what your time was. Like, hey, we're doing 40s today, go. And you just don't know what your time was. I would imagine if you time these kids, the kids who try too hard might run faster, but generally speaking, most kids aren't going to run as fast because they have no idea and they're not motivated. And so just use an outcome, jump over a hurdle, jump up. If it's basketball, jump up and touch something, or high jump up and hit something with your head. Just something that makes sense to you and the athlete. And then when you do depth jumps, monitor the ground contact. So that the ground contact will dramatically alter. And I spoke about these 5 things and all the biomechanics, but honestly, if I just take that dial and take the ground contact from a 0.3 second landing to a 0.18, a lot of things change. And you'll find that you're fundamentally going to get to the balls of the feet faster. Things like maybe the knees might come in a longer contact, not a bad thing. It's a triangle and you're using compression, but you may find that happens less in a shorter contact. So there's biomechanical things, or even like, if I had that Russian guy who's a 7'9" high jumper doing that crazy hurdle hop, I bet that guy's ground contact is quite a bit less. And so start with fast ground contacts because it's hard to go the other way around. What I mean is, you have to really set the tone. And we oftentimes think of working strength to speed, but with the body and plyometrics, I mean, think of a kid. You start as a kid just running and jumping and everything's kind of higher velocity. And then you start maybe lifting weights and doing the more forceful stuff when you get older. But you don't start a kid with tons of force, like it's going to ruin everything. And so the plyometrics, I view it the same way in a season. Some people might view it as backwards, but it makes sense to me as I've done it, is you start with the fast contacts because that's what you want to teach the body. Like I'm going to teach you how to get class 2 to the ball of the foot real fast. If I spend too much time not doing that, then and then we're talking about the fascial system here. We're talking about a myofascial system that takes reps. It's not like just getting stronger in the weight room where I can do 3 sets of 3 once a week and go up. We're talking reps and reps and reps. So you got to, my mind is you start early with low contact times, and then you can allow some longer contact times later in the season because those are more potentiations. Those are more like global nervous system. Let's stimulate. And an elastic athlete like a Carl Lewis type may be stimulated better by some plyometrics versus a Ben Johnson might be type muscular, might be stimulated by like a heavy squat or something. But those are not things that make an athlete. They just can potentiate the athlete.
When you talk about getting to the ball of the foot quickly, one of the cues that I give in all my plyos is we want to bounce. We want to bounce off the ground. Is that just talking similar things?
Yeah, I think you could. I mean, I think that words and imagery is more powerful than me. I mean, if I have a group of high schoolers, like if I got like a bunch of 15-year-olds and I'm, got the board and I'm drawing the lever, like they're gonna. So I think just by saying, yeah, bounce and then keep like the story and the alliteration or the imagery is probably more powerful than saying get to the ball of the foot quickly. So I would either say like bounce. One thing I like to say is notice. Helen Hall, who was on my podcast, she's a running coach, a distance running coach, but she talks about the gift. She calls it the gift of notice. And something you might tell an athlete is say, hey, we're going to do these just ankle hops and we're going to do 20 meters, double leg hops, just do, and just go. And then maybe you put 2 cones that are 5 meters in the middle. So I'm going to do some hops. I hit these cones and then hey, do quick hops and now do high hops, boom, boom, boom. And now go quick hops again. And just say, hey, I just want you guys to notice what changed. Did you have more ball of the foot? Where did the force go? What felt like it was taking the load when you went big? And so it just helps athletes. I mean, I want to empower the athlete to be the learner. So most of my cues, I love the imagery cues, but also I love notice-based cues. But you have to have kids who want to learn, but I think those are your best kids. Those are the kids who are going to be the best, the kids who want to learn. They want to notice, they want to see what changes. And that's kind of universal as I see it too for any cue, because how many coaches is a kid going to have, and they're going to have all going to have their own things. They say, run this way, jump this way, but I want to teach you to notice. And so I think I was just doing that today for me, myself. I was doing depth jumps and I was doing like long contact, then get quicker every jump and notice what changes. Just because I could still do it. So it's just fun. As long as I can still do it, I want to still do it and learn. So when I work with athletes that I can just have that too. But yeah, bounce anyways, long story short, I'd like bounce because I imagine if you saw the change there, you're probably going to see a lot more ball of the foot.
Now that one thing that you've mentioned a couple of times is going from your class 1 to class 2 levers. And talking about physics, it's always bad when you're trying to do a physics analogy and one kid gets it and then you look at it and you go, well, wait a minute, you all have the same teacher, but only one of you gets it. What's going on there? But anyway, what are some of your favorite drills to go from class 1 to class 2?
Yeah, so that's a good one. So I'll say every time you're going vertical, it's not as easy. So just doing hurdle hops, like that's not quite as natural of a vector as going like a long jump takeoff, like where I'm running and I have my last step, which is a certain distance. And then it basically like I'm landing almost on the heel. Sorry, like this is my takeoff. Like I'm landing on the heel and then I'm projecting up and I have all this horizontal velocity behind me versus if I'm coming straight down, I could get away with just being on the ball of the foot entirely, but that's not how every high jump, every basketball takeoff, LeBron dunking, even sprinting, that heel will often tick down for just a quick second. It's like maybe it's a neural signal. It usually will kind of tick there. So the heel, we do want the heel, but I think for me, that's a good question. First, I think that a competence with like a class 2 only is a good thing. Meaning, like think about like single leg line hops where you don't let the heel touch. Like know what it's like to be class 2 only. So be good at. I need to know that you can at least get to class 2 and have good strength there. And I think that's pretty not groundbreaking by any means. Just do a lot of quick, extensive hops on the ball of the foot in different directions, and you get better at being on the ball of the foot. So then, well, we need to transition, and that's where I think that let me give you an example of one drill I do really like that I think can facilitate that. And there is, yeah, long to high is good, but let's just talk about something regular like bounding. So let's say we're doing bounding, and one of the things I really like doing with athletes is contrasts. And so most of the time when people bound, and this is, and Chris, I know you know this, that bounding as we coach it doesn't really transfer that well to sprinting, not like we would think because we use it all the time. But if you look at bounding fundamentally, it's usually, especially when you're going for distance, like every bound is height and distance. It's usually a pretty prolonged transition from heel's going to come down because it has to then getting to the ball of the foot and then levering off. And so what I like doing is things like transitions where I say I have zones, 10 meters, 10 meters, 10 meters, 10 meters. I want you to do long bounds for 10 meters, then really quick bounds for 10 meters, long bounds for 10 meters, really quick bounds for 10 meters. Tell me what changed. Tell me how you felt your feet acting differently. And what has to happen as soon as you do quick bounds where you sacrifice distance, really speed bounding, what's going to happen is the athlete's going to notice that transition happened a lot faster. And not only did it happen faster, but it requires a lot more pre-tension. Like the body's got to be ready for that transition. Because I think if we just do long bounding, people can kind of ride on the skeleton, almost like just the joints, and kind of ride on that. And they can really hit the heel heavy sometimes, versus if the body knows it's got to be quicker, just reducing ground contact time. Maybe we could just say that, just things that reduce ground contact time. By nature, force a faster. As soon as you put that clock on it, the body has to get class 2 faster. It has to get to the ball of the foot faster. It has no other option. So just that constraint, movements where there's like a quick, a long, and allows athletes to notice is good. I just think the more athletes can notice what's going on, I think that can be good, but then you also don't want to overcoach. And then lastly, I will say the high to long stuff, I think is helpful. So like bounding in like you're going like high, long, or flat to high type activities, which is any track jump. That's a high jump, or it's even a long jump to a degree. It's a javelin throw with a long last step. Those are all long to high transitions and are going to require a heel going to the ball of the foot. So the trick is like, if it's just that takeoff, how do you make someone get there faster? Well, in short, they have to have the strength to get to the ball of the foot and be strong on it. And then they have to have the skill to notice and feel how to guide that there. So I like notice-based drills, like just notice how this changed when the contact time changed, when the emphasis changed, and then hopefully they can fill in all the neural gaps.
Who's the lady that had that podcast?
Oh, that was Helen Hall. Yeah, she works in London.
There's a question up. How much do you jump athletes in a sport that jumps a lot already in their sport? Would the approach be to add variety or variability of types of jumps that they don't get in the sport?
Yeah, so with that, it's more of a weakness-based system. And so the weakness is oftentimes in the foot. Like if, like there's an athlete I'm working with right now who is incredibly strong and whose feet don't really get to class 2 very quickly. And is the thing that she is lacking is she lacks internal rotation. Because I will say this, if you get into like the hyper arch stuff and like you look at an athlete, I mentioned having a strong class 2, getting the ball of the foot and having strength is usually those athletes. I don't know if you can see like the tendons in my hand. You should see tendons on the top of the foot, and you should see a little bit of a hook-like quality to that athlete's toes, not gripping. So they're not gripping or grabbing the ground. They're just kind of sitting on the ground in this little like nice hook. And that shows that the arch of the foot is loaded up. Athletes who have really flat toes, and as I work with swimmers were the biggest kind of culprits of having flat toes, but that actually, if you're a good swimmer, you actually shouldn't have a loaded foot. It'll mess you up. That notwithstanding, so I want to make sure that they can have this arch tension. So an athlete who is already jumping a lot, they might be jumping a lot, but they're not jumping on a good arch. So we'll do a lot of high rep, like hyper arch hops, if you will. You could just call it jump roping. But think of the hyper arch hop was Chong Ji on my show, my podcast years ago. And it's basically jump roping in a little bit more of a squatted position. So you're squatting into it a little bit. And he has people hopping with an emphasis on the ball of the second toe. And so you could say that's getting a little inside edge, like that's kind of a little bit of inside edge type stuff, which I noticed athletes who are more reactive and have a better RSI tend to be more on that part of the foot. They get there easily. They're not collapsed, but they get there easily versus people who are really on the outside edge of their foot. And so those, you're going to lose tension. So if someone doesn't have that, even in season or they're playing a sport, all those jumps they're doing aren't using that system. So I want to create, so I'll have them do several minutes of that regularly, like every day almost. And I also want to make sure that I can get them to get those tendons to pop a little bit, to get the arch to form. And a lot of times if they can't do it, they might have an internal, if they're externally rotated in the tibia and femur. Sometimes I've internally rotated athletes and their toes went from not being able to do that to things start popping. So it's like, anyways, that could be multifactorial, but I like the extensive hops for athletes who can't do that. Otherwise than that, I just like what Boo Schneckstader said on my podcast maybe 6-7 months ago, and I resonate with it, is hitting, let's say your basketball, hitting depth jumps once every, like, I think his said it was 3 weeks. I've done it every 2 weeks. And to me, that's fine. Like, just getting a depth jump stimulus every 2 weeks, something like that, I think for a mature athlete is good. Or you could do a little bit lower grade stimulus. And then the rest of it to me is just a lot of more specific strength because they're jumping in their sport. So you want to just be careful with how often. So either you go on the low end of just the real low ankle hop type stuff, or the high end of depth jumps every 2 to 3 weeks. And maybe like, if you're going every 2 weeks, I'd say 10 to 20 reps. And every 3 weeks, you can do a little bit more than that.
Joe, I've heard you talk before about your own jumps career and, the training that worked and the training that didn't. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about the mistakes people made with you?
Oh yeah, the mistakes that my coaches made or that I made.
Or either mistakes in training. We won't blame anybody.
Nah, I mean, most of it was my own fault. I learned and failed along the way. And I mean, you're talking to a guy too who jumped his high jump career best at 21. I mean, I think Usain Bolt hit his best pretty early, but that's sad, right? Because I was so into it. And the biggest mistakes, I think, for high jump, for both speed, high jump, triple jump, let's just talk about that. Because I actually found I could throw javelin pretty well later into my 20s. Like I was throwing javelin PRs, and I hadn't been doing the event that long, but javelin did not drop off like my jumps and those types of things did when I didn't train the right way. And so I think the big ones, well, one, I'll just say this is, I think if you don't play enough games if you just don't play enough games and you're a jumper, especially, you're in trouble. Like, it doesn't matter. You have to be playing, like, even if it's soccer, doesn't matter. You have to do stuff that rotates joints effectively, allows rotations, and it's just fast and fun and aggressive. And if you kind of have a lack of that, at some point you're just going to fall into, I think, a mode where you can't, and a lot of stuff is real minute, but you're going to fall into a mode where everything just becomes more mundane, a little bit slower. And I'll say too, even my sprinting didn't fall off that badly as my jumps did throughout my late 20s through a variety of reasons. So that's one. Overlifting, especially if you're a jumper, just doing too many deep squats. And it's not even the fact that you're doing a deep squat, it's the how. As I've learned more and more, and I had a good podcast with Pat Davidson, if you squat and you push knees out and you externally rotate the femurs and you sit back, which is how most people, you walk in the football weight room, that's probably how a lot of kids are coached, is what happens is your pelvic diaphragm is very important in jumping and sprinting. Well, sprinting less, it is, but it's not, and I'll explain why. So you have this diaphragm that sits on the bottom of your pelvis, and when you squat and you're really like opening and going deep, it's opening up to let the guts descend and to let you descend. So think of it as I'm going back, and I feel for this now to try to feel what's going on, but that's descending. And at the same time, that's actually related to a class 1 lever that sits in class 1 longer. So dorsiflexion for longer. So by deep squatting a lot, I'm getting better at pelvic bowl descending and more dorsiflexion. I think I'm just being a better Olympic lifter. But the problem is that all your movements are going to start to have more dorsiflexion quality, more class 1 quality, if that makes sense, if you deep squat a lot. And the funny thing is, I remember, I don't remember where I heard this, but I remember in the 80s or 70s, some sort of thing, this was the thing, and Tony, you could probably say this better than anybody, but it was like track coaches didn't like deep squats because they felt it was going to make the athlete's ankles too loose, or they were going to lose the stiffness in the ankle that the athlete was making the athlete fast or whatever. And it's funny because, you know, the strength and conditioning community would laugh at that. They would say, oh, that's stupid. You want like some mobility and whatever. But I think maybe what they were getting at, what they saw, because you probably see it, right? You got kids jump real high and they go and do a bunch of squatting and they have more dorsiflexion. Maybe they're just not that pop off the ground anymore. Is a lot of that deep squatting causes the pelvic floor to descend. And then the ankle is also going to reciprocate by just being more dorsiflexed. And I wish I have a video of me in a dunk contest at age 18. It's at my parents' house. I'm gonna film it and get it, because I'm
dunk contest is at your parents' house, or the videos at your parents' house?
The video. Actually, no, the video is at like my friend's parents' house in Wisconsin somewhere. It's like this vault. And anyways, I remember watching it in my mid-20s, and I'm like up on the balls of my feet going to dunk almost. Like, I mean, I think I had a heel hit, but class 2 extremely fast, just pop, pop, pop. And I would get off the ground and do a reverse dunk, like boom, and the rims, like I was blown away by how just fast my body went up. Fast forward 4 years later, I have a video of myself in this dunk contest in college doing the same dunk basically, but heels are just bam, bam, bam. And it just takes way more muscle to get up in the air, because you're putting yourself in this situation where the heels come down, it's more time, the muscles are more involved, and they're acting a different way. And you've created a different paradigm for yourself. And I was doing a lot of deep squats that year too, and the year before, which actually was my high jump PR year, but not a lot. I feel like you can get away with it for a period of time before it starts to catch up with you.
Yeah.
And I was talking with Pat Davidson about this. I say the how. When I was in high school, when I was like that, I was in strength and conditioning class, and actually doing squats helped take my knee pain away, because it's something with the fascia and just putting the fascia under load. And I was doing those squats like with my knees coming together. Like the strength coach, any college strength coach would have killed me for that. They would have said, you're doing it wrong, and you know, you're going to hurt yourself. Not only did doing this with my knees like together, and especially when it got heavy, when it was like lighter, it was probably pretty neutral. But I remember distinctly when it getting heavy, I remember I did like a heavier set. My knees are almost hitting each other. And well, jumpers are going to do that, because what they're doing by the internal rotation is, one, they're not using muscle now. They're trading muscle for compression. They're trading muscle for getting into the elastic system. I'm framing up my joint structure by rotating my knees in, and it's not valgus because it's rotation. And I'm pinching off my pelvic diaphragm from descending when I do that. As soon as you rotate in, you pinch off that pelvic diaphragm from dropping. And now my feet and ankles are still springy as they always were. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so it's almost like the brain, what that taught me is the brain knows, like the athlete is smart. Like when you watch them do stuff, their body is smart. And how many coaching cues over the years, and now I'm not telling everyone to necessarily go and I did not say make your athlete squat and make their knees touch each other. Because part of that is you have to have rotation. Your feet have to be loaded. Not everyone can do that, especially athletes who are on the outside edge of their feet and they don't have a strong fascial system and they're not connected. They're going to go into valgus and it's not going to feel good. I somehow cured my knees like that and still could jump really high and off the ball of my feet really well. And then slowly through college, more lifting. You know, I was so into like all the power stuff and all the stories, like the Olympic high jumper who, you know, had such a high vertical. And if I got my clean this high and whatever, and I will say, like, even when I was high jumping 21, I was 21, I high jumped 7 feet. And even my squats then, again, didn't have a strength coach. If I did, I may have jumped lower because they may have told me to squat through my heels and push my knees out. And I don't know how I remember all this stuff. I just do. I'm just like, but I remember the way I liked to squat, what felt good was pushing my knees forward and loading up the balls of my feet. It just felt good. It just felt easier. And that's how I squatted. And so I think that was reciprocated with just getting the ball, get to class 2. I was watching a video of some jumper on Instagram squatting. This guy, he's going to high jump like 7'8". He gets his head like this far over the rim. And when he squats, he's squatting 315 and his heels are this high off the ground. He's on his butt. And I guarantee he's not even thinking about it either. So, but yeah, you'll see that class 2 lever even in squatting and good athletes where you don't tell them to do something. Just watch what they want to do. And I think we just need to be mindful when we're teaching squats of what's happening with the lever systems based off of if I want to be a reactive and explosive athlete.
I think the sad thing about all that is Louis Simmons is the one who kind of dictated that, where knees out, outside of your feet, sit back into it. And then if you think about the pelvic diaphragm, those guys use that to bounce off the bottom because their guts were so big. That's why they had such big guts, is they could bounce off the bottom using their gut with their belt. And what do we try and do? We're going to try and replicate what this 340-pound monster is doing with an enormous gut and take that down into some athlete who's got a 28-inch waist.
Yeah.
Still to try and get him to bounce down in it using a gut that doesn't exist. Just because Louis Simmons did it and you went out there and you got the West Side Barbell shirt.
Yeah, and it's like to squat with a suit too, because powerlifters don't squat like Olympic lifters. Lifters get the inside edge of their foot and their knees are kind of coming in on that catch. Like, and that's their body being reactive. You think their coach is going to coach that out of them? I mean, some probably do, but it's just funny to watch athletes when it's reactive and the brain responds and not the coach's cue is what's going through the pipe, you know?
So would you squat it? If you could do it all over again, would you still squat?
Yeah, I would have. I needed to, because I was so, and I was fast too that year. I jumped 7 feet. I was fast, man. I ran the 150. I mean, again, I was never fast. I ran the 100 one time in high school on a concrete track and ran 11.5 hand time. I mean, it's okay. It's faster than some people, but it's not going to blow the world away at all. And I remember I was running 150. They were timing on 150 and I was touching 16s on 150. So that year I was all right. I mean, for me, that felt good because I was not like the fastest guy. But yeah, I would, because it was a good potentiation tool. Like in the sense that I remember I had my best track meet ever. And I work with my athletes like this at Wilmington. A lot of my athletes at Wilmington had their best meet ever after we do weightlifting as a potentiation day. A lot of Olympic lifts, but we'd squat too sometimes, or step ups. I mean, I didn't squat them a ton and I think I had learned, but my best meet ever, I triple jumped 46. Again, not lighting the world on fire, but I high jump. I was like this far over 7 feet the first time I ever tried the bar. And I had squatted a really good, not all the way down. Because again, I don't think all the way down is good. Research has shown halfway beats all the way when you're strong enough. As soon as your strength is 1.7 in a deep squat, and if I'm doing that, even I'm going to watch how you're doing that deep squat. You know, I'm not, we're going to be careful if we even do it. But so a partial squat, really heavy, potentiated me, and I had the best track meet of my life. I mean, that was just, so I needed that stuff. I was electric. I needed it. But again, I think if you do it too much over too long a period of time, so that's why I'm a big fan of the Soviets, like phase it in, phase it out, phase it in, phase it out, you know, and when you are doing it, you just, and just don't let people hang their hat on maxes, which is the worst. I think that's more it is when people hang their hat on maxes, they get addicted to that stuff. And that's when the compensations and the grinds start to come out. Oh, if I just squat this much more, I'll be this much better. No, you won't. I mean, it's as soon as that mentality hits, then you're done. When it's fun and the bar's going up, oh, cool, I'm getting stronger, this is fun, you know, then it's no problem. It's just once it just in your head, you have to do more. I've been there. I've worked with elite athletes. I've worked with people at the Olympics, like, and I can tell you that never, like that, once that mentality hits, it's never made anyone better. So if you're not a strength athlete. So I would still squat. I would just have stuck with not being coached in it. And then just knowing more that being reactive, being fast and good off one leg and track jumps did not require squatting for more than 2 or 3 months at a time, deep squatting. And then you could be done and then go do something else and then come back to it later. And so, yeah, I still would have. I just would have been more careful, would have done it less, would have played more sports, would have hung my hat off, faster ground contact time stuff. Just would have been, not maybe have more fun along the way a little here and there. So, yeah, I still would have though.
I know floating heel, active foot is definitely big with unilateral exercises. Do you coach it with bilateral exercises too?
Yeah, I do floating heel. This is the thing with floating heel. So I will, like, if someone is really bad with the foot, well, I'll use it. But I think we tend to think like, oh, if you have weak feet, this is going to cure everything. It's not. Like, there's a lot of stuff that is needed to help someone transition from a class 2, class 1, have a good class 2. And so the only thing that the thing I like about class 2, or sorry, not class 2, floating heel, it's better for people who don't access the forefoot well. It's better than probably having the whole foot on the ground. If I put someone on a foot pressure map and they're real heel heavy, what I'll do when I assess people online oftentimes and in person is I'll just have them stand on one foot. Where's most of the force? Oh, I feel most of it in my heel. You know, like, okay, those people just need to get in touch with their ball of their foot more, period. You know, whoever you are. But the thing that cannot do is it doesn't train midfoot, which midfoot is basically, as you could say, strength through the arch. Floating heel doesn't guarantee you have a good transverse arch activation. And it also doesn't help with kind of that ball of the foot to the forefoot transition. I just did a talk with David Gray, who's becoming more well-known in the world of physical therapy, rehab, and biomechanics. And he was talking about how, look, you can't totally segment things out. Like, ideally, I maybe have your foot on the ground and it's like 20%, 80%. Like have your whole foot, but you should have, like, I don't know, put like something irritating here that makes you not want to be on your heel. You know, like you know what I'm saying? Like, it's better to have the full sensory experience so your body can use it all and guide it all. And I think floating heel can be a tool, like a teaching tool, but it's never going to give you everything. Like, it's not going to be fully elastic either. It's not going to, if you watch like the Achilles tendon, even the Achilles tendon thickens when it loads and thins out when it unloads. Watch them accelerate from the back or high jump or whatever. It's almost bizarro because if you pulled a rubber band back, it would thin, and then you would pull and it would thicken and go. The Achilles, for some reason I don't know, is the opposite. It thins as it unloads, and so you don't really see the thinning in a floating heel squat so much. Probably more than a regular squat, but it's not gonna, you know, it's a teaching tool. It's a sensory tool. It's good for people whose feet just aren't good, very good, period. And it's good for making sure that people don't get heel heavy on their squats. So, but I would say there's still a lot to go. And then single leg is better because the same reason single leg jump roping is good. It's just way more tension in that area, because the double leg is almost more just the skill of the balancing act. It's not going to really activate that many motor units in the calf. It's just not, at the end of the day. When we're sprinting and we're dealing with 6, 7, 8, or jumping 10, 11, 12 times body weight, doing a squat with 250 with floating heels is going to be a little bit more force, but it's not going to touch that bam. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's good, but I think there's other things to just be in touch with to get a better lever.
All right, Joe, I asked you a question about the podcast.
Sure.
What's your process to get people? Like, what's your whole process? Because if you're listening, if you're anyone in the training world, everyone listens to your podcast. So what's the whole process? How do you go about it?
I just spin a wheel and just see who comes up. And then when nothing comes up, I call you and Dan Fichter up and Tony and see if you guys come on. Just kidding. It's two things. One is just it's kind of cool because once you start kind of going, it's like once you start anything, you're incentivized to study someone more because you know they could be a podcast guest. So I think there's that subtle incentivization that's like, oh, like normally I'd be not lazy, but normally I wouldn't be incentivized to really follow this person. I think like a good example is actually David Gray. I think if I'd never did a podcast, I may have not ever actually had a conversation with David Gray for the first time. And I'm so glad I did, because that guy's awesome. Yeah. And so it's just stuff like that, where it's just like, that could be a thing. And so, but other than that, I don't know, like I get stuck on themes. Like I get stuck on extreme isos. Who's everybody I could talk to about extreme isometrics? And then there's been a lot of luck. Like, just to be honest, I've had people like just give me a book, say, hey, can I send you my book? Rocky Snyder was one of them. I just get an email, hey, can I send you my book? I'm like, of course, whenever I get those emails, I'm like, okay, like someone's on send me their book, cool, I'll check it out. I never really get my hopes up, but this book came and it blew me away. Like I read it in like 3 days And I was like, this guy is a genius, and he's in Santa Cruz. So we went down and did a podcast with him. And then same thing happened with a guy named Edward Yu. It was the art of slowing down and run fast. He's a Feldenkrais guy, really into, again, the sensory system. How do I sense better to run faster? And so I read his book too. It blew me away. Like, and so sometimes, or a Sheldon Dunlap, I was just sitting next to this guy at a table at a conference, and he just starts talking to me, and I'm like, this guy is amazing. Like, he's doing stuff with triphasic and oscillating reps that I haven't ever heard. And I don't know, sometimes I just think there's no accidents, you know, and stuff happens for a reason. So half of it, I think, is just me being incentivized a little more. And then half of it is just probably some sort of dumb luck to keep things alive, and I'll just keep taking it. So
who's turned you down?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, you know, I'm not going to say the name, but actually I think one of the only memorable ones that turned me down was a very, like, a New York Times bestselling author on a human performance topic. And I thought I had been turned down for months, 7-8 months. And then I just got an email basically saying he was going to do it. So I gotta say who it is, though. You'll see it when you come out. I don't think I've been turned down other than that, to be honest. You would be surprised, like, who wants to be on a podcast? It's amazing. Like, it's just.
How about what's been your most successful podcast? Who broke the records?
Oh, Tendons. Keith Barr and the Tendons have been so Keith Barr because I think everyone wants tendon health, and it's like interesting because you can also see who listened to the whole thing and who listened to part of it. So Keith Barr and the tendon health one has destroyed. I mean, it's got like probably close to 20,000 downloads.
Wow.
But the people who've listened to all of it is not very much, respective to other ones. Christian Thibodeau's neurotyping one, the first neurotyping episode he did is way up there too. It's at least 15,000. And that one I think is more listened to because you start getting into these different neurotypes based off personality. It's like, I have never heard this before. This is amazing. And that was one of the biggest game changers for me. And I still use that a lot when dealing with anybody. And so that's another really big one.
How about the most underrated, like a podcast that everybody should listen to and hardly anybody did?
Oh, you know what? I was going to look up, go look up the shows. Two, I'll give you two. One was my friend Paul Cater, who coaches down in Monterey. He is a strength coach down there. And he is the absolute king of the vibe. By vibe, I mean, think like what happens to kids when you run a gauntlet 40. And for him, every day in strength and conditioning is kind of like a gauntlet 40 in some sense or other. Like, he makes training come alive like no one I've ever worked with. I mean, and if more people were like coaches were like him, I just think the world would be a better place in coaching. And for some reason, I think it's just because he wasn't like really well known, or maybe he is. His Instagram's got a fair amount, but so he talked a lot about like using music and using rhythm and how athletes need rhythm over. Usually it's like, oh, let's just get to the weightlifting. Because I've had so many interns that just want to coach Olympic lifts and then they're sitting on their phones. I was like, you want this to be your whole job? Are you serious? Like, and he would, Paul was so good at it's like, I mean, it might get in the weeds, but like treating training almost as like, if you know, like the Fibonacci number or like basically that moment that's like the 0.63 through the workout. That is the crescendo. And he is so good at that, like building. And then you hit this crescendo and then everything comes down. And the building is just him doing really cool rhythm work, just fun, challenging work on the part of the athlete, making them keep in touch to a beat, doing all his drills to that stuff and just being like causing them to explore their environment, have awareness. It was awesome. So I was a little disappointed that one wasn't super well listened to because I've changed when I was a full-time strength coach. And even now, if I train someone in person, that is my format. We don't have a scripted part until I've gone through almost this ad lib, more like let's get you ready to train type element. And I found that actually reduced injuries really well in my teams. Back when I was at Cal, men's tennis in particular, that just became more and more part of what I did with them. And I noticed their injury rates really seemed to go down the more we got away from just having it be a structured lift. Anyways, and then Ross Jeffs. If you just list out, it was where we talked about trainers and racers. That one, because I had him on twice, and his one on the 3 types of sprinter, if you caught that one, the metabolic, the elastic, and the strength, that is awesome, by the way. And that one was good. But his first one was on racers and trainers, I think. That I just remember just being blown away by that show, and it wasn't very well listened to. Because again, not many people know who Ross Jeffs is. But that show, it's like, dude, if someone isn't making progress, it's just so huge to know, do you do better in competition or practice? What is your arousal level like? And if you can get up for practice, you're basically blasting yourself, you know, relative to the guy who can't. And so just to have that in mind and to know where people are at early, I think is really important. And so that was a great show. And I wasn't super listened to, but those are definitely 2 super underrated shows.
Was your last book your best? Speed Strength?
Dude, that book took a lot out of me to write. I thought I was going to be done with that book in less than a year. And then I met a Darian and basically trained with him every week and had translated his stuff slowly, and it just filtered into everything. And it was one of those things where I couldn't write the chapter unless I knew it had something unique and different to offer that wasn't already out there, and that I felt like I didn't turn over every stone. And so that's been my best today. It's way better than my first book, that's for sure.
Why should people read it?
I think it's because, why should people read my book? I think the first chapter is the one I've probably gotten the most good feedback on. And that's basically, you know, if you listen to a Darian stuff, sometimes he can be a little hard to understand. And basically I spent 3 years with the guy, 2 years before I wrote Speed Strength, and just spent, I can't tell you how many eureka moments in the shower I had, just like, oh, that's what a Darian meant. And literally as soon as I got out, I had to go write it down Evernote. I had a huge Evernote file almost devoted completely to eureka moments with a Darian. And not only that, but at age 34, I mean, it's on free lap. So, you know, you could say it could be slightly off versus a laser time earlier in my career. But at age 34, I beat my 10-meter fly PR better than I ran at age 24. And I also had just destroyed what I had ran 2 or 3 years earlier, trying all the high knee cues and all this stuff and the wicket stuff. I blew it away. And I was like, okay, like this guy's onto something. And so it was basically just that first chapter was me just, why is this? Why is this? Why is this? And just really trying to turn that over.
What was the most important eureka moment?
Oh, squatty running, without question. It was actually squatted running. Like the idea that run tall actually does not work. And I'm not saying, like, if you watch Usain Bolt run tall, yeah, his hip height and his angle of knee and ankle at the ground height is not like he's super bent. But if you watch people and compare people, generally speaking, if the people who are trying to run tall actually have shorter strides, and that vertical force, the way the data runs, if you actually look at the studies, yes, if you step on a force plate, it's going to register more than the horizontal vectors because it's biased towards gravity in the direction of gravity. But when people move from running, say, 6 meters a second to 11, the horizontal is actually what explodes relative to vertical. And if you run too tall, you don't get a chance to actually apply horizontal force by means of the lever arm of the shin. If I run too tall, that shin can never be a good lever arm to direct force. Again, I'm not telling people to push. I don't think Darian's not telling anyone to actually literally sweep the ground, because I think we tend to say, oh, people who are saying push the ground back, and yeah, don't push the ground backwards. It's too fast. By the time you would think about pushing the ground backwards in spring, the chance is gone. It's done. But what I can do is if I set myself up to create the shin angle to create the force, now I'm doing well. And that's where the squatty run, to me, it's a remedy to someone like me who is almost over elastic, not compressing anymore, told to run tall and lift their knees and dorsiflex. And you learn, and so that was the big one. And that's actually right away that I chopped 2/10 off my 30-meter dash using that technique for a short period of time. And then even other athletes, I found similar results. And then finally the fly 10, setting that record with the squatty, I'm like, I'm sold. Okay, I'm in. And now I don't make every athlete like do that religiously. I more look at what are the shin, is the shin getting in a position that is allowing the lever action so you fall, work with gravity, and create a horizontal moment. If it's not, let's look at squatty running. And so the squatty run was definitely that was it. That was like the I called a Darian up when I set that 10-meter fly, and I was like just on fire. Like I was like, all right, you could tell me anything now and I'll believe it. But I still do test out all this stuff and really try to vet it and really try to be unbiased and try to, like, you know, be the argument against, rather, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I am always trying to do that, but that was the moment. That was like, yeah.
I would love to see video of you as a tall runner and a squatty runner.
I'll send them to you. I think I have them buried on my iPad.
I would like to see the difference, because I have a hard time picturing this.
Yeah,
it's not like he's carrying luggage or anything like that. It's a small amount. It's just
right.
It's not like you're like you know.
It's not like a carnival race type thing. It's.
But I think, well, here, think of it this way too, because I think one of the easiest ways to put it is, I think we say run tall, foot under the hip. Well, in sprinting, if this is my hip, where my eye is, if you actually legitimately, the first time your foot touched the ground was right here, dead nuts under, you'd fall on your face. It's just be physics. The braking force hits, because there is braking force, and what's going to happen? Okay, so you have to strike in front. You have to. And I mean, actually, it's funny. Watch Matt Bowling when he was in high school. That guy was casting way out in front. And it actually looked like they were trying to fix him and make him cast a little less that next year. I don't know exactly, but if you watch it closely, anyways. And Shelly Ann Fraser-Price was the queen of this as I saw it. She's 5 foot tall. And how can she stay ahead of these other women at the end of a 100-meter race being 5 foot? She kept that shin out enough to give her good vertical support at that shorter height, where a lot of those smaller ball and fast twitch muscle type people tend to be more bent and under. So anyways, you have to be here, but just think of it. If this is a fixed height and I go taller, you see what happens? You know what I'm saying? Like, so when you squat more, it's almost like naturally, and again, it doesn't have to be a lot. If you squat too much, that leg's going to bend to make it happen a lot. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, sometimes if that comes down a little bit and then it breaks down, the leg bends to hit the angle and then you're off. I hope I described that. That's probably the first time I've ever described that on their hand. I don't know. I don't have my 3D physics background, but, and again, I do always compare that, because I always go back to like Usain Bolt running, and that guy's hips are pretty high off the ground. And I think about maybe his levers can just get tighter and work faster in the air. You could also say that is he can fold up tight enough in the air to get away with it. And also, if you do watch Bolt's shin after he does come under, his shin does get to a good lever where he can still apply that, you know, that push but he's not pushing, you know, like we don't want to push, but you know what I'm saying? So because I've dissected this stuff, try to figure out how to work it. And also, if you want to get someone's glutes, make them squatty run. And if they don't use their glutes squatty running, something's wrong. So
somebody asked, how would you coach a squatty run?
Yes, I was going to ask the same thing.
Okay, so the easiest way to do it is, so you go on my Instagram if you want. There's a ball. It says best glute burner for athletes. It's sad that you have to have these headlines to have people watch your stuff, but I'm just pushing a ball, like a physio ball. This, again, a Darian thing. You have a physio ball and just squat down next to it. Like, not a lot, but make your, Chris, you were the first person to set me to this, but torso and shin matches. So squat, torso, shin match, and go next to it and keep your chest bone, xiphoid bone, sternum bone facing forward. And so you're not like hunching over it, and just start pushing it, staying in that position. So it's a constraint to keep you in that position. And my colleague, Mike Kozak, has athletes focus on like squeezing an orange between their calf and hamstring as they're pushing that ball along to kind of keep a tighter, like a little bit of a tighter angle between that calf and hamstring as they're going. So he'll use that ideal. So just doing that and keeping down there is probably the start. But Adarian would have you do stuff like he'll work on the timing. The elbow comes back, the knee on the same side comes forward. If you can't do that timing, you're not going to get it. But start with the ball and then take away the ball. People who can't do it very well usually have bad mid stance. That's getting in the weeds. But if you look at like David Gray and Kyle Dobbs and the Bill Hartman stuff, mid stance is basically that point where when my arch of my foot is right under my hips and gait, like, am I strong there? Can I get the right hip rotation? If you can't, people usually tend to be really bad at squatty runs. They compensate. They do other things to move. So There is, or just do boom boom, do squatted boom booms. That's another one too. Like do boom booms and just squat a little bit on it. Say, hey, I just want you to squat your hips. And good fast sprinters often will do that naturally. If you say everyone do this, like this boom type drill, you usually see the good sprinters almost have that angle still. They still want to squat a little bit and have that shin angle back just a little bit. Where ones who I don't think have that speed tend to just be more straight up and tall, like kind of like wormy, I'd call it. Like everything's just going up, but the fast ones can do that. And they almost still have that subtle little angle that's like, it's like programmed in it. Like they want to be in that angle because they're fast.
Chris, is this similar to, I forget, did you call these the Marshall runs, or, where you banded somebody and there's
similar. That was more working for a split.
Yes.
But
they were squatty though. I mean, they were low to the ground.
That's kind of one of the reasons why I went to Bentley prime times is it's more of a squatted prime time. Yeah. And that's why I switched over and I got more bang for the buck.
Yeah, glute city on those. I mean, just do the two. Just that's the gift of notice. Have athletes do straight leg prime times and have them do Bentley and say, hey, which one felt faster? That was actually another thing that made me ready to accept the squatty run. Was I remember doing wickets. This is before I met a Darian, and I remember I might have been reading the Franz Bosch book or I don't know what. And I was just thinking, all right, I'm going to run super tall the first, and then I'm going to squat a little more each successive run. And I remember it was like, okay, run the first one real tall. Oh, this is like everyone says to run. Great. Run a little lower. By about the third, I felt so much power and so much glute. I was like, something's got to be right with this. Like, it's like, it's one of those moments you're breaking away from everything that everyone said to do, but you're like, but there's so much power here. Like, how can this be wrong? This feels too good to be wrong, or something. And I think that's why I was so maybe accepting of the idea of the squatty run when that happened. So you could also do that. You could also say, you could just scale it. Just say, if you're doing wicket drills with, again, I wouldn't do wickets with very high, just, super low bars, but just say, hey, every run, just keep your hips a little lower and just notice what happens. Which one feels fastest?
So if you're doing a squatty run, Chris, do you get you would get a better split, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So this is where what Joel's talking and what you were talking about comes together, kind of.
Yeah, and Ken Clark, and it's similar stuff, just different vocabulary.
Yeah.
Yeah, just not to be a salesman, but there's a really good resource. There's a really good webinar on Just Life Sports Darian did with a lot of like video on different athletes side by side, squatted, not squatted. And it's like squatty webinar or something. It was quite good. So that's another resource.
Hang on, a new question popped up here. Oh, wait a minute. My wide receiver coach coaches to run 90% height to get in and out of cuts faster. I'm assuming this is along the same lines as a squatty run. Would this be correct?
Oh, receivers are the squattiest when they're doing cuts. Yeah. Like those guys get down. Like, and that's another thing I feel like where rotation and angles is awesome because it can train. It's like angular squatty running, And as long as no one's coaching you out of it and you have the joint, ability to get down there, like I said, mid stance, which I could talk about that, how to work that, but that teaches it automatically. And I think that's why those change of direction sports are really like a great same but different. You're playing football in the off season, you're in track in the spring, and you're learning to run squatted in a multiple directions without being coached playing football, and then you're ready to go in spring. You have that power.
I know this is the time, but I've got never mind. I just had some videos, but I won't pull them. I don't want to capture the screen.
Well, hey, this has been great, Joe. Hopefully, now we will mention as well, you have a course coming up?
Yeah, so I was writing this book on the foot. You mentioned my best book. I was writing one on the foot with a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about. But as always, I just I wanted to work some more stuff out with it. I wanted to try a few more things with some athletes. It was good, but kind of like speed strength, I didn't want to release it till I felt like it was truly great, I guess, in my own mind. So I have a course that's coming out in the meantime that I think is really good. I'm calling it Elastic Essentials. And so it's basically kind of what I was saying with the squats. like, it's almost like taking everything that we treat or do in physical preparation, lifting, that I feel like has the potential to hurt athletes, like such as just being in class 1 too long, the squatting incorrectly. I have a lot of stuff in there on crawling, and I call it natural locomotion method, using like a crawling, lunging, and running type matrices and things like that. It's basically how to make your whole training system resonate with the way the body works, free energy return, and build it around the human body rather than, you know, the suited powerlifting squat paradigm. So just a way of looking at training under the free energy return paradigms and building out from there. So that should be out hopefully pretty soon. I've been working hard on it. I'm pretty excited about it.
Well, that sounds like a great topic for the next TFC.
It does.
Yeah, yeah, that would be a lot of fun.
TFC 2021.
Or summer. Who knows what's going to happen?
Who knows? Joel, thank you so much. And I hope everybody checks out your presentation and buys your book and your upcoming course.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. Sorry I couldn't see you this year, but it's good seeing you guys here, your faces online. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Joel.
See ya.
See ya.